Hi, my name is Lisa Shen. I'm a product manager in Google Cloud. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to set up an Anthos User Cluster on bare metal via the Google Cloud Console. Anthos provides a unified platform for managing Kubernetes clusters across hybrid and multi-cloud environment. These clusters can run on top of VMware vSphere or on the bare metal servers. Anthos is a software product that extends Google Cloud services and engineering best practices to your environments, so you can modernize applications faster and establish operational consistency among them. Anthos clusters on bare metal brings Google Kubernetes engine to your on-prem data centers. With Anthos clusters on bare metal, you can create, manage, and upgrade Kubernetes clusters on your own hardware in the data center or edge with best performance and flexibility. You not only have direct control over the application scale, security, and network latency, but also getting the benefit of containerized applications through the GKE and Anthos components. You can use BM-Cuddle utility today to manage the lifecycle operations of Anthos clusters on bare metal. We have now announced a new feature that allows you to create the bare metal clusters from the Google console. A new Google Cloud-hosted GKE on-prem API is introduced to manage the clusters from the cloud. Now let's take a look at how to use the Cloud Console to create an Anthos User Cluster on bare metal. In the Google Cloud Console, select the cloud project that you want to create a cluster in. This must be the same project that the admin cluster is registered to. Note that I have already set up Anthos admin cluster before the video, and I'm using a Google Cloud Compute Engine instance to simulate the actual hardware service environment. First, click Create Cluster, click On Premises, and then select Bare Metal. And then you get to the cluster basics. Now you'll need to enter the name for the user cluster, and under Admin Cluster, select the desired admin cluster from the list. And in the GCP API location field, select the Google Cloud region from the list. The GKE on-prem API runs in Google Cloud's infrastructure, and then the console uses this API to create a cluster in your data center. To manage your clusters, the GKE on-prem API must store metadata about your cluster state in the Google Cloud region that you specify when creating the cluster. And then the metadata lets GKE on-prem API manage the user cluster lifecycle, and it doesn't include any workload-specific data. And then next, you need to select the Anthos clusters on bare metal version for your user cluster. User cluster must be either in the same version as the admin cluster or one minor version lower than the admin cluster. And then let's click the Continue to go to the networking session. In the networking session, we'll provide IP address for various use. We'll need to add a control plane node IP first. And then in the load balancer section, select the load balancer from the mode list to set up for the cluster. In this demo, we're going to use the Metal LB, the bundled load balancers, which can run on a dedicated pool of workloads or on the same nodes as the control plane. Here, we're going to just use the control plane node. For the LB address pool, we're going to use the default name, and then we're going to put in an IP address range. In the virtual IP section, we'll need to add a control plane VIP first. Let's copy and paste that IP address in here. This is the VIP on the load balancer for the user cluster's Kubernetes API server. And we're going to leave the ingress VIP as it is. In the service and pod side sections, Specify the Kubernetes service and pod IP address range inside the notation. Note they cannot overlap with each other nor with any address outside the cluster that you want to reach from inside the cluster. So let's copy the service CIDR and pod CIDRs here. Now let's move on to the storage section. Anthos clusters on bare metal provides block and file storage interfaces. They have default options, but you can also customize the configurations. In this demo, we're going to just take the default option. The final section is the configuration related to the node pools. A node pool is a template for the groups of worker nodes created in the cluster. In the worker node section, let's enter the IP address of the machine for the cluster to run on. And we're now done with the configuration section. Let's click Verify and Create. It takes 15 minutes or more to create a user cluster. The console displays the status messages as it verifies the settings and creates the cluster in the data center. Now let's fast forward to the end of the user cluster creation. As you can see, the cluster is now created successfully and it's up and running. Let's log into the cluster in the console so we can view the details of the cluster. We're going to just use the Google identity to log in here. Once it's logged in, you can view all the details of the cluster from the console. Now let's go back to our workstation and we're going to use Connect Gateway to interact with the user cluster via kubectl and deploy a simple application. We're going to use G-Cloud Container Fleet Membership CLI to fetch the cluster credentials used to interact with the Connect Gateway. First, we're going to get the cluster name. The membership name is the same as the cluster name in this case. And then we'll get the user cluster credentials. After we have the necessary credentials, we can run commands using kubectl as you normally would for any Kubernetes clusters, and you do not need to specify the name of the kubeconfig file. As you can see, we have a worker node and a control plane node for our user cluster that we just created. Now let's deploy a simple Hello applications by creating a deployment. Next, we're going to create a Kubernetes service, which is a Kubernetes resource that lets you expose the application to external traffic. And we'll run the kubectl expose command. Now, if we go back to the Google Cloud Console, we can verify that the Hello Server service and workload that we've just created are listed for this particular user cluster. In the last section of the demo, I'll show you how to access the user cluster and run the application from the admin workstation. First, we're going to SSH into the admin workstation that I've set up prior to this video recording. And then in the admin workstation, we'll locate admin cluster context, which is in the bmctl-workspace folder. Next, we'll get the kubeconfig file for the user cluster by using bmctl get credentials command. With this command, a kubeconfig with user cluster's credentials are written to a file that is placed in the folder called bm-cluster-1, which is the same as our user cluster name. Now, you can access the user cluster via kubectl by pointing the kubeconfig file to the user cluster context. Now, with the external IP we've obtained via the kubectl getService command, we can issue the cur command to verify the hello server is indeed up and running here. This concludes my demo. Be sure to check out our website above to learn more about Anthos and its various deployment options, including Anthos cluster on bare metal. Thank you for watching the video.